"Excuse me," the shop assistant said, with that smile they save for people who can't afford anything. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" She looked me up and down like I'd wandered in from a garage sale. Behind her, Madison Avenue's newest luxury boutique sparkled with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns that cost more than most people's cars. "Just browsing," I replied, smoothing my simple jeans and sweater. Nothing fancy, but clean and comfortable. Unlike the other customers in their head-to-toe designer everything, I looked like someone's mom running errands. "It's just..." She adjusted her perfectly styled hair. "These pieces start at $5,000. We wouldn't want you to waste your time." $5,000. If only she knew I'd personally approved that price point when I invested in this boutique. They had no idea I was the one who sold them this land. After my husband died, developers begged me for years to sell our family property. When I finally said yes, they turned it into this fancy outdoor mall. I took that money and bought into the boutiques and hotel they built on my old backyard. "She's probably lost," another assistant whispered, loud enough for half the store to hear. "I don't think she realizes this is a high-end boutique." The other customers gave their sideway glances, their Hermes bags and Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor as they moved away from me like I was contagious. My phone buzzed. 2 missed calls from my hotel manager. The grand opening was tonight. The luxury hotel down the street needed my final approval before the VIP guests arrived. "Did you see the opening numbers?" The manager gushed to a group of wealthy women near the jewelry counter. "We did $2 million in sales our first week. And the investor is some mysterious woman. Nobody knows who she is, but she's got serious money." She paused, like this was the most exciting gossip ever, clearly expecting me to be impressed by her insider knowledge. I nodded politely, thinking about the contracts waiting in my office, the ones that would triple these sales figures by Christmas. But I didn't reveal who I was. I didn't need to prove anything to these people. Let them think what they wanted about my simple clothes and regular appearance. Let them speculate about the wealthy backer while she stood right in front of them, invisible in her non-designer jeans and comfortable sweater. There was something almost amusing about listening to them wonder about someone they'd already dismissed as unworthy of their attention. The irony was delicious. Here they were, bragging about working for a store I'd helped fund with money from selling the land it sits on. They were so focused on appearances, so convinced that wealth had to announce itself with designer labels and flashy jewelry, that they couldn't recognize the woman who'd made their jobs possible. The money hadn't changed me. I still shopped at the same grocery store, still drove my old Honda until last month, still preferred jeans to fancy dresses. But it had opened my eyes to how cruel people could be. How they looked at your shoes before they looked at your heart. How they decided your worth based on your handbag instead of your character. I'd lived 50 years thinking most people were basically good. 2 years of unexpected wealth had taught me otherwise. "Oh my God, Brittany," one of the sales girls gushed to her coworker. "Are you going to the grand opening tonight? At the luxury hotel down the street?" Brittany flipped her hair smugly. "Of course. It's invitation only, for elite members and VIP guests. Not just anyone can get in." She glanced at me with obvious disdain. "They're very selective about their clientele." "Oh my God, Brittany," one of the sales girls gushed to her coworker. "Are you going to the grand opening tonight? At the luxury hotel down the street?" Brittany flipped her hair smugly. "Of course. It's invitation only, for elite members and VIP guests. Not just anyone can get in." She glanced at me with obvious disdain. "They're very selective about their clientele." The other girl, who looked younger and kinder, asked quietly, "How do you get invited to something like that?" "You have to be someone important," Brittany laughed. "Have the right connections, know the right people. It's not for regular folks." She said regular folks while looking directly at me. The younger assistant who'd asked about the hotel invitations walked over to me with a genuine smile. "Hi, I'm Emma. Can I help you find anything today?" We have some beautiful pieces that might interest you." Before I could answer, Brittany appeared like a hawk, shooting Emma a death stare that could have frozen fire. She grabbed Emma's arm and pulled her aside, whispering harshly while pointing at me. "Don't waste your time on her. She's not our target customer." Emma's face fell as she glanced back at me apologetically, clearly torn between being kind and keeping her job. I made a mental note about Emma. Genuine kindness was rare in places like this. I could literally fire Brittany right this second, walk over and tell her to pack her things. But something held me back. Maybe I wanted to see just how far their cruelty would go before I revealed who I really was. The woman with the Chanel bag looked me up and down like I was something she'd stepped in, her nose literally wrinkling when she saw my shoes. She walked over to one of the shop assistants and whispered loudly in her ear, making sure I could hear every word. "Isn't this place supposed to be for a certain caliber of people only?" She gestured toward me with obvious disdain. The woman pointed directly at me. Her friends sneered behind their designer sunglasses. A security guard walked over, looking apologetic but firm. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is a private shopping experience for our clientele." "Private shopping experience," I repeated, biting back a laugh. If only they knew I owned half the stores on this street. The whole block had been my project since selling the family land. I'd taken that unexpected windfall and invested it into luxury retail spaces, handpicked each brand that would occupy the storefronts. The French cafe next door where these same women sipped their overpriced lattes? Mine. The jewelry store they'd probably browse after dismissing me? Also mine. I'd walked this street hundreds of times during construction, wearing jeans and work boots, planning every detail while contractors called me boss. But apparently, putting on the same comfortable clothes to actually visit my finished properties made me look like someone who didn't belong. The security guard was still waiting for my response, looking increasingly uncomfortable as I stood there smiling. Behind him, the sales assistants whispered among themselves, probably wondering why the unwanted customer wasn't leaving when asked nicely. They had no idea they were about to kick out their investor. One of the Chanel woman's friends stared at my shoes and made a face like she smelled something bad. I was starting to feel uncomfortable. My cheeks burned as every eye in the store seemed to be judging me. I felt out of place, even in the store I'd helped fund. The irony should have been funny, but it wasn't. It hurt. I could feel my heart race as I realized how cruel people could be when they thought someone was beneath them. This wasn't just about clothes or shoes or handbags. This was about how they saw me as a human being, worthless, unwanted, someone to be removed like garbage. For a moment, I forgot about my unexpected wealth and new investments. I was just a simple woman whose husband had died 2 years ago. Someone who'd lived quietly on family land until developers made me rich overnight. The whispers felt like knives. The stares made my skin crawl. Part of me wanted to run out and never come back. But then I remembered something important. I'd funded this place with money from selling the land it sits on. I'd chosen every light fixture, approved every price tag, hired every person who was now treating me like dirt. I'd created jobs for these people, brought luxury shopping to this neighborhood, invested millions of my own money to make this dream a reality. They could judge my shoes all they wanted. I owned the ground they were standing on. By now, a small crowd had gathered in the store. Every person was staring at me like I was some kind of spectacle. I could feel their eyes scanning me from head to toe, my worn jeans, my basic sweater, my practical shoes. Their faces showed the same expression, disgust mixed with superiority. Some whispered to each other behind their hands while pointing in my direction. Others just stared openly, not even trying to hide their judgment. I felt my cheeks burning with embarrassment. My hands started shaking slightly as I realized I'd become the entertainment for their afternoon shopping trip. My phone buzzed. The hotel manager was calling. The guests were arriving for the grand opening of my new hotel down the street. "We're sending a car to get you," my hotel manager texts. I texted back, "Shopping." Handle until I can get there. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched the wealthy customers examine price tags without flinching. A woman my age held up a dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "To success," she declared to her shopping companion, admiring herself in the mirror. "To people who understand what real luxury looks like. To keeping quality products away from people who don't appreciate them." Everyone around her nodded. Nobody noticed I didn't smile along. They never noticed much about people like me. But standing there, watching their cruel faces, something inside me snapped. How many other women had they treated this way? How many mothers, grandmothers, working women had walked into places like this and been made to feel worthless? I thought about every woman who'd ever been judged for her clothes, dismissed for her shoes, made to feel small by people who thought money made them better human beings. That's when I realized I actually had the power to change this. Right here, right now. I could make them understand that their behavior was wrong, that treating people like garbage said everything about them and nothing about their victims. "Ma'am," the security guard said more firmly, "I really need you to leave now. You're disrupting the shopping experience for our valued customers." The valued customers. The same women who spent their husbands' money on overpriced handbags while looking down on anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of wealth. The same customers I'd specifically designed this store to attract. "I'm comfortable here," I replied, checking my watch. 5 minutes until everything changed. The manager shrugged to the security guard. "Some people just don't understand they don't belong in places like this. Call the police if she won't leave voluntarily." I heard car doors slamming outside. My phone lit up again. "Hotel grand opening guests confirmed. Your presence required for VIP arrangements." "What's all that noise?" The Chanel woman frowned, looking toward the street. The sound got louder. My sleek black Bentley pulled up directly outside, followed by a second car with my hotel management team. Both vehicles had the subtle Morrison Holdings logo on the doors. "Who drives cars like that to go shopping?" one of the assistants whispered. Through the windows, I watched every person in the store stop what they were doing. They stared as my driver got out, followed by 3 men in perfectly tailored suits carrying leather portfolios. This was going to be good. My hotel manager walked straight into the store like he belonged there, his presence immediately commanding attention. His $8,000 suit made him stand out like a CEO among interns. He looked around until he saw me, then his face broke into a big smile. He walked right over to me, completely ignoring all the fancy customers and shocked workers who were still staring at me like I was garbage. "Ms. Morrison," he said warmly, reaching out to shake my hand. "Sorry to bother you while you're shopping, but we need to talk about tonight." The whole store went quiet. Everyone stopped talking. All the champagne glasses stopped moving. I could feel every person in the room looking back and forth between me and this important man who was being so nice to me. Brittany's mouth dropped open. The Chanel woman looked like she'd seen a ghost. The other customers started whispering to each other, trying to figure out what was going on. Emma, the sweet worker, watched with big eyes that looked hopeful. The manager kept talking to me like I was somebody special. "I know you're busy, and I wouldn't have come here myself if it wasn't really important. Everything is going great, just like you wanted." I could see everyone trying to figure it out. Who was this woman they'd been treating like dirt? Why was this powerful man being so respectful to her? The same woman they wanted to throw out was obviously somebody important, and they were all starting to realize it. The confused looks on their faces made me want to laugh. "Ms. Morrison," he said clearly, loud enough for the entire boutique to hear, "the hotel grand opening is confirmed. The VIP guest list requires your final approval before tonight's event." "Thanks, David." I stood up from the uncomfortable chair they'd banished me to. "The hotel acquisition papers ready?" "Yes, ma'am. $50 million purchase pending your approval. The seller wants to close the deal at tonight's grand opening." The entire store fell into uncomfortable silence. Brittany slowly backed away from me, her head hanging down like a scolded child. The Chanel woman couldn't look at me anymore. She stared at the floor, her face red with embarrassment. Her friends huddled together, whispering apologies to each other, but too ashamed to say anything to me. The other customers shifted awkwardly, suddenly very interested in their shoes. No one wanted to make eye contact. The woman who'd demanded I be removed covered her face with her hands. Even the security guard looked down at his feet, probably wishing he could disappear. Everyone who had stared at me with disgust just minutes before now couldn't bear to look in my direction. They turned their backs, studied price tags they weren't reading, pretended to be busy with anything that would help them avoid facing what they'd done. The shame was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. These people who'd felt so superior, so entitled to judge me, now realized they'd been cruel to someone who could buy and sell them all. The silence stretched on and on, broken only by the sound of people shifting uncomfortably and clearing their throats. Nobody said a word. Nobody apologized. They just stood there, drowning in their own embarrassment. I took a moment to savor this. The same people who'd treated me like garbage now stood frozen in shame. Every whisper, every cruel look, every attempt to humiliate me had just backfired spectacularly. This was exactly the lesson they needed to learn. Jessica, another man in a suit approached, looking serious. What's the situation here? Why are we meeting in the retail location instead of the hotel? I smiled and pulled out my phone. The breaking news alert was already live. Breaking. Morrison Holdings finalizes luxury hotel acquisition. Local landowner turns inheritance into $50 million empire. Just some business, I said casually, watching the Chanel woman stumble backward in her heels. You know, my little shopping hobby you were so concerned about. But you're not... The security guard sputtered, his authority suddenly looking very small. You can't be Jessica Morrison. The same Jessica Morrison who sold this land to developers? I finished for him. The one who invested that money into this boutique and the hotel down the street? I paused. The one who signs your paychecks? The boutique went silent, except for the gentle hum of the air conditioning and the sound of expensive heels shuffling nervously on marble. You own this store? The manager's voice cracked. Through Morrison Holdings, I nodded. That wealthy backer everyone's been talking about? The one with serious money? That would be me, just a simple woman who inherited some land and made smart investments. The sales assistant who'd first insulted me stepped forward, her face pale. Ms. Morrison, why didn't you tell us who you were? Tell you what? I laughed softly. Like when you said I was in the wrong place? When you called security to remove me because my shoes weren't expensive enough? When you decided I didn't belong here based on my outfit? My phone buzzed again. The hotel really needed me. Ms. Morrison, David said gently, the grand opening preparations are time-sensitive. The celebrity guests have arrived. Right. I picked up my simple purse, the one they'd all judged as too cheap for their precious store. I have to cut my shopping trip short. Wait, the manager called out, her retail instincts kicking in. Perhaps we could arrange a private shopping session for someone of your position. Now you want to give me special treatment? I turned back, watching their faces change from condescension to panic. After treating me like a criminal for walking into a store I helped fund? After judging me based on my clothes instead of asking if I needed help? The Chanel woman looked mortified. Ms. Morrison, we had no idea. If we'd known you were the owner, you'd have treated me differently? I raised an eyebrow. Based on my bank account instead of my character? That's exactly the problem. I turned to David, my hotel manager, while everyone watched in stunned silence. David, I need you to check something for me. Is there a Brittany on tonight's VIP guest list? David pulled out his tablet and scrolled through. Yes, ma'am, Brittany Walsh is confirmed for the grand opening. Please remove her, I said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear. And add Emma instead. I looked at the kind assistant who'd tried to help me. Emma, you're now my personal guest for tonight's grand opening. Emma gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Ms. Morrison, thank you so much. Brittany's face went from white to bright red. You can't do that. I've been planning this for weeks. I bought a new dress. I can do whatever I want, I replied calmly. It's my hotel. Then I smiled at Emma. Oh, and David, could you arrange for Emma to have anything she'd like from the store today? On me, of course. The reaction was instant. The Chanel woman's jaw dropped. The other snooty customers looked like they'd been slapped. Brittany started crying right there in front of everyone. The woman who demanded I be removed grabbed her friend's arm like she needed support. Anything? Emma whispered, tears in her eyes. Anything at all, I confirmed, watching the other women realize that kindness had just been rewarded while cruelty got punished. You deserve it for being the only person here who treated me like a human being. The silence that followed was absolutely perfect. Justice served, kindness rewarded, and everyone watching knew exactly why it happened. Maybe, I said, standing and gathering my simple jacket, this is a good time to think about what makes someone a valued customer, and whether judging people by their shoes is really the best business strategy. Ms. Morrison, the store manager called as I headed toward the door. What should we tell the other customers? About what happened here? Tell them the truth, I suggested. That you spent the afternoon trying to kick out the woman who funded the store because she wasn't wearing the right brands. Her face went pale as she realized what this meant for her job. Or, I said more gently, you could just say you learned something about not judging books by their covers. Your choice. The hotel guests, David reminded me, we should move. Staff, I said, looking at all of them. This has been educational. Maybe think about treating every customer like they might be someone important, because you never know who's watching. As I walked toward the door, I felt their eyes following me. I stopped and looked at Emma with a warm smile. Emma, I saw you eyeing that Hermes bag earlier. Pick out a dress and shoes to match it for tonight's grand opening. I winked at her, and she looked like she might cry from happiness. Brittany stood frozen by the jewelry counter, mascara running down her cheeks, looking absolutely pathetic. The Chanel woman and her friends huddled together like scolded children, their designer outfits suddenly looking like costumes they couldn't afford. As I reached the door, the security guard stepped forward nervously. Ma'am, please understand. I was just doing my job. I had to follow orders. I stopped and looked at him with ice-cold eyes. Your job is to protect customers, not judge them based on their clothes. You chose to be cruel when you could have been kind. His face crumpled with shame as my words hit him. He stepped back, knowing there was nothing he could say to fix what he'd done. The hotel manager opened the Bentley door for me like I was royalty. A crowd had gathered outside, phones out, recording everything. People whispered excitedly as they realized they'd just witnessed something incredible. As I settled into the leather seat, I looked back at the store through the window. Everyone inside was still frozen, watching me leave. The woman they'd tried to humiliate was driving away in luxury while they stood there drowning in their own shame. The weeks that followed were exactly what I expected. My phone exploded with desperate messages from everyone who'd treated me badly, all suddenly wanting to make amends now that they knew I had money. I forwarded them all to my assistant with one simple instruction: archive under too late to matter. The headlines were everywhere. Landowner turned mogul kicked out of her own store. From farm inheritance to retail empire, how snobbery backfired spectacularly. The shopping trip that went viral. 6 months later, I received a handwritten note from a young woman. Ms. Morrison, I read about what happened at your store. I'm a college student who loves fashion but can't afford designer clothes. Thank you for proving that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of what they're wearing. Your story gave me hope that success doesn't require designer labels. I framed that letter and put it on my office wall. The boutique taught me everything I needed to know about sudden wealth. It doesn't change who you are inside. but it sure reveals who other people really are. It's not about wearing the right brands. It's about building something meaningful from whatever life gives you. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong immediately. Sometimes it's letting them slowly realize they just insulted someone who could buy their entire store with money from land their great-grandmother had farmed. The hotel grand opening they'd dismissed as unimportant, it became the most exclusive event of the year. The land sale they'd never bothered to ask about, it had funded their entire workplace. The comfortable clothes they'd mocked, I still wear them to board meetings. But the best part wasn't the money or the power or even watching them scramble to apologize. It was knowing that while they'd been worried about appearances, I'd been building substance from an unexpected inheritance and a lot of smart choices. The next time someone judges a customer by their clothes, they remember the story of the farmer's widow in Target jeans, who owned the whole shopping district. And maybe, just maybe, they think twice before deciding who belongs where. The wrong customer became the right lesson. And my business? It's built on the radical idea that everyone deserves respect, regardless of what they're wearing when they walk through the door. Because in the end, success isn't about looking rich. It's about being kind. And the customers you dismiss today might just be the landowner who made your job possible.